Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with the final 2 issues of Transformers G.I. Joe. Flint was taken captive, Rumble got exploded, Storm Shadow became shark food, I think, and we find out that Destro and Starscream are the ones that led the Joes to the island, in an overly complicated and luck-dependent plan to take out their leaders. I guess they didn't have much luck finding better jobs on LinkedIn. Issue 5's cover is confusing. It looks like maybe Superion is getting destroyed, but I can't tell if another plane has crashed into him or he just spontaneously combusted. Someone did not have their tray in the full upright position. Silverbolt! Skipping recap pages, we go straight to Snake Eyes emerging from the waters, with a near-dead Storm Shadow in his arms. Oh good, because what I really wanted was for this subplot to survive a shark attack. Hey, even the assassin agrees with me, saying that Snake should have let the fish go all jaws on him. He now realizes his clan brother is a true warrior and wants to die with honor, not asking for forgiveness, but only assurance that Snake understands. No, he does not understand why people put pineapple on pizza. No one does! He seems to give up the ghost there and then, but who can say, since I thought he was finished when Nibbles had a crack at him last issue. And Snake goes climbing, finding Shadow's sword just as Ravage emerges from the rocks, though a decisive strike seems to take the robot cat out as well. Snake Eyes is really more of a robot dog person, though considering Ravage blew up off-panel, he could have stayed dead and nothing in the story would have changed, but I guess this is a bit more definitive, so moving on. Inside the Terrordrome, Joe Strike Team 2 leader Flint is chained up at the mercy of Dr. Mindbender and the Baroness. He tells them there's only one fighter currently under his command. Himself. Man, those Army of One recruitment ads were not kidding. Since his code name is Flint, one of the villains begins talking about possessing ancient cutting tools made of actual flint. I think it's Baroness, since she then asks if the Joe can tell why her guards fear her, but I would think it attached to the 2 other bubbles talking about the tools in the first place. Also, I have no idea what we're looking at in this panel. It looks like a garden hose with insects peeking out of it. Seriously, what is this? Anyway, Baroness tells him that for all the fierceness the men of Cobra possess, they're afraid of her because they've seen her use these tools. Her macrame is just really horrible. I mean, it gave Steve nightmares for a week. I am not even kidding. She takes what I guess is a blade. Again, the art makes things blend together. And I guess stabs Flint with it, and that weird luminescence is meant to represent pain as he holds back a scream. I'm guessing. Tell me all about your little invasion plan. Okay. There's this band called the Beatles. We're going to have them perform on the Ed Sullivan Show. But that's the British invasion. You're American. And no one will ever suspect us. At the airbase, Beachhead has evaded another attack from Frenzy, calling out for fellow Joe Grunt, and apparently the Decepticon thought he was talking about the guttural noise, telling him to stay put and lay low. Climbing a plane out of his foe's sight, Beach taunts the con over to him, cuts a line when he wanders underneath, and covers him in either oil or fuel that's colored black for some reason. When commanded, Grunt fires on the plane and it explodes. Though damaged, Frenzy is still ticking, so the Joes keep shooting, foregoing grenades since they could be thrown back. Maybe tell him it's a robot egg that's about to hatch. If he's as dumb as Rumble was, that might work. Whether or not this truly is the untimely end of Frenzy, we'll have to wait and see, as we go about 6,000 miles into the air, where Lady J is trying to contact Fleet Hawk, taking a chance on one frequency not locked out, while staving off Wild Weasel, who apparently wanted to fight Scarlet for unknown reasons. He opens fire and takes out Jay's radio, so she obliges him for the dogfight he's clearly itching for. Realizing his craft is faster, Our Lady opts for a slow variation of the Immelmann turn, a maneuver named for a German air ace first utilized in World War I, which can either look like this or like this. And the panels don't really specify which one. Either way, Jay hits her enemy's nose, much to Weasel's anger. Whether this downs him is uncertain, as the following 2-page spread sees our separated heroes all staring off their respective panels, maybe at the gigantic Superion over there.
What? I haven't been helping out because I had to go to the little giant robot's room. Why, do I have toilet paper on my foot again?
Megatron towers over Torhaven, a town neighboring the Terrordrome, as Cobra Commander orders Major Blood to drag people from their homes and captives brought up from the mines, which they apparently have all of a sudden, and take them all out to the harbor and guarded by 3 machine gunners. Meg says the people aren't going to fight for him, but the commander notes that, against an enemy with a conscience, they'll act as a second line of defense.
And if I start telling them to act like animals, pigs, cows, dogs, and the like, then the invaders will think the Terrordrome is just a farm and leave.
The 2 Joe squads have reunited, rather suddenly and inauspiciously, with Beachhead reporting the loss of Breaker, and wanting Duke's metal men to know Lady J is in the Cobra plane above and is therefore off-limits. I wholeheartedly endorse any measures taken to protect the most attractive member of the team. Don't judge me. Duke clarifies the Autobots aren't his and that they don't seem capable of hurting anyone that isn't attacking them. Unless you get some of them hammered on refined motor oil. Jazz is a surprisingly mean drunk. While Roadblock admires what looks like a grenade launcher apparently just lying around, Ironhide notices that Scarlet is pretty distant, not standing with the others. Although Block was just right there, but anyway. She's glad her friends are back, but someone's missing, someone she doesn't know and never will. Meanwhile, at the contradiction. But hey, look, there he is! Snake Eyes approaches, and despite his face covering, she can tell something's up with his face. She reaches for him, but he pushes her arm aside and walks away. Oh, what a heartbreaking rejection and surprising turn in their storied romance that was never actually established at all throughout this book. Huh? Duke introduces the mute ninja to Optimus Prime, who says the Autobots will get the Joes across the water where they need to go, but beyond that, they won't interfere in a human war. Though the suspicious Prowl suggests that the Joes could be the aggressors, Hound sticks up for them, saying he'd rather take a little damage at their side than play it safe. Strong, noble words that would feel more important if we'd seen him actually interact with any of these soldiers. As it is, most of the Autobots just kind of pop in and out as needed for a given scene. As Cobra Commander's earlier orders are followed and people are rounded up and shackled to the harbor, Prime tells Superion to stop. In the middle of a kryptonite mist, apparently, then says that unlike Decepticons, who will take to violence for no reason, Autobots don't fight unless they have no choice. When he sees the people change at the shore, Duke explains that they're prisoners of Cobra, and it's likely they've done the same to millions of others in Europe. At least they hope.
You hope this has happened to millions of your people?
Optimus, if they aren't slaves, they're dead. Or forced to work retail during the winter, with non-stop generic Christmas music and different singers doing the same songs. They've started doing covers from Mariah Carey, Prime! After a moment's contemplation, Prime orders the Autobots to roll out, which is classic and expected, but I can't help but feel something amiss here. It's understandable that Prime wouldn't want to interfere in a foreign planet's affairs, give the advantage to one side when it's unsure what the nature of the conflict is. But this moral quandary feels rather weak to me. Maybe it's because Prime and most of the Autobots haven't really done a whole lot, or maybe it's because it makes no sense. Prime has to know the Decepticons are allied with Cobra, what with facing Rumble literally dressed in serpent-themed gear. Beachhead probably mentioned taking out Frenzy, not to mention all the other cons the Joes have seen thus far. Their enemies lending firepower to a terrorist organization would be the definition of Prime having no choice but to step in. I get wanting a cool, rallying moment after the teased possibility that the good guys might not see the battle through. I can appreciate it and enjoy it even if it gets super cheesy. But it just didn't work well here. I suppose displaying the human suffering was just icing on the cake. Even Megatron points out to Cobra Commander that his cruelty has only cemented Prime's alliance with the invading soldiers. CC questions if he's too scared to face his foes in combat, explaining their million-years-long conflict and orders Shockwave to transform. He'll only do so at Megatron's command, who tells him the loyalty is appreciated, but he dares not challenge their human compatriot's authority, and the commander almost believes he's learned his place. Shocky turns into himself, leaning to the right as a huge cannon takes aim on his left shoulder. If there was a toy version of this, I'm pretty sure the transformation instructions would just say, "Push him over. There, he's transformed." Our heroes begin crossing the water, both Hound and Stalker able to tell, in each their own way, that there are enemy fighters waiting for them, likely to strike regardless of how they approach. It's suggested that if two Joes go in and clear the trench closest to the hostages, Superion should be fast enough to shield them as the rest of the Joes and Autobots advance. Stalker, who suggested the plan, recommends himself and Snake Eyes, instead of, two Joes who aren't the most wounded so far.
I am too smart. I am too smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-R-T. Unfortunately,
Cobra Commander, who was monologuing about his power, orders Shockwave to fire, and Superion takes a nasty hit.
No disassemble.
Worst part is, it's the weekend and local mechanics won't be open until Monday. The commander continues to boast about his destiny, that all who rise against him are fated to fall, and how he always knew he was a god. Of what? Incompetent man-snake chemists or used cars? The final issue's cover has Megatron looking mega-wrecked as he stands over Snake Eyes, and looking like he's holding wires attached to what could be a Cybertronian head, but it's all obscured in mist. My guess would be Starscream, naturally. But maybe it's supposed to be a surprise for anyone not looking too closely.
I'm gonna use your head for a bowling ball.
It begins with narration about Grimlock, Bumblebee, Roadblock, and Stalker, and the Crucible of War. They were born of different worlds, but in 2 days they have become more than friends. While it has felt like the story is dragged on, it doesn't feel like the passage of time is presented enough to be 2 days. All the backgrounds being dark and cloudy doesn't help. Equally poor representation for friendship, other than the guy who rhymes and the bot that thinks he's a king. And even then, barely. Stalker is rather pessimistic, thinking the Joes are doomed to die without Autobot backup. Weird, Prime's roll-out last issue seemed rather pro-involvement, what with the enthusiasm of the font, but I guess it was meant to be more ambiguous than that, somehow? Anyway, not even Roadblock's faith in General Hawk's fleet lifts his spirits, and Stalker was at least grateful to be part of a crew that didn't care about his race, but feels they're expendable nevertheless. Grimlock recalls what Block said in a previous issue, about soldiers not quitting, and asks if Stalker is a real soldier or playing pretend, as the promised fleet is now in sight. "I'd break your face for talking to me like that, if I could reach it. And if it weren't made of metal, that too." Seriously, though, Stalker appreciates the straight talk, something he takes as a sign of true friendship, and now has a bit more faith in the outcome of the mission. We now return you to Superion exploding, already in progress. It seems to be causing some kind of Aurora Borealis effect for some reason.
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country...
Maybe it's supposed to be water, as on the next page, we see Lifeline, Grunt, Beachhead, and Leatherneck struggling, or falling, with a chain? Yeah, I can't tell what's going on. But context clues on the next page indicate they were about to drown, as Hound has just rescued them. He and Wheeljack noticed them because of the little guys making waves, but he's disappeared, leaving behind what only appears to be a partially submerged helmet. Did they not mention who the little guy is because he's going to make a surprise reappearance, or because we're just expected to know who they're talking about? Lady J has fished Duke out of the water, apparently having landed that plane off-panel since last issue. Anyway, Major Blood and the Dreadnoks, traditionally Zartan's group, approach, intending to make her their prisoner of war. She grabs a javelin-length stick and, in one fell swoop between panels, has already taken out 2 of the Dreadnoks and then clubs the 3rd. I like seeing Lady J kick Terror's tail, but I prefer to actually see her doing so. Flint comes in, knocking out Blood and telling Jay not to throw her weapon. He says he escaped because he wasn't as well guarded as he should have been, and wants to know where the others are. But the lady knows this is Zartan, since he told her not to throw, so she hurls the spike at him. And is it because the real Flint knows you don't miss? Because he knows you don't need help in a fight? Because you don't throw a spear, you launch it or something? What? What is it? Instead of clarification, we go to Skywarp, who's overheard some Cobra goons griping about being looked down on, which he finds offensive, since the Khans are helping them conquer the Earth and all. That's when Optimus busts forth out from the ground to confront him, declaring that the brutality that destroyed Cybertron won't be repeated on this world.
Autobots! We brought violence and tyranny to the people of Earth when we led the Decepticons here. In hindsight, we really should have double-checked all the names on that mass email we sent out with this planet's coordinates.
Now the heroic robots will truly be entering the fight rather than just reacting to their surroundings, and they seem to have the upper hand, which wasn't the case 4 million years ago. And while I do like the touch of making Soundwave's shoulder cannon a Gatling gun, the art gripes still remain because I don't know who Ironhide is punching here. Anyway, maybe the Autobots have gotten tougher, maybe the Khans are softer, but Prime notes they haven't faced the worst their enemies have, and they've lost the Aerialbots, Hound, Wheeljack, and Mirage, who I don't think we saw in this story yet. They're robots, how can they not communicate with each other over distances? We saw Hound and Jack rescue some of the Joes a few pages ago. How or when were they destroyed, or is he just literally saying he doesn't know where they are? If it's the latter, that just makes it all the more confusing when he mentions them in the same breath as the destroyed Aerialbots.
Insane, I tell you!
In the Terrordrome, Cobra Commander is waiting on Megatron to take action.
Your enemies have scattered my troops and destroyed the Combaticons!
When? Where were the Combaticons to begin with? Were they taken out in the gutters between the panels?
What's going on?
Megs replies that the Autobots are Double C's enemies now. The tyrant from Tarn can't order Shockwave to fire on Prime's crew as commanded because in his cannon mode, Shocky should typically take time to repair and recalibrate after each shot, since it causes intense strain on him. But after the commander had him fire 16 successive shots, he's basically ruined. You know that call you got yesterday about your living alien robot death cannon's warranty? Yeah, for once it wasn't a telemarketer. You didn't renew, so now you're screwed. However, the power of the Matrix could restore Shocky, with an implication that Megs could do so, but Drapeface isn't going to be so foolish as to hand over that kind of power. Megatron didn't expect him to, so Shockwave will remain useless, his power wasted, because as the commander said earlier, that's what slaves are for. This line almost feels like Megs is pointing out a flaw, not just in his human cohort's logic, but in slavery itself. Almost as if the leader of the Decepticons is saying, yeah, I'm evil, and I'll knock my minions around if I need to, but I'm not into slavery because of how wasteful it is to one's goals. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, though. Snake Eyes and Scarlet wash ashore, intent on going after the railgun, making their way into the caverns below the enemy base, and he's apparently trying to leave her behind. The redhead insists the ninja doesn't need to fight every battle alone, and that's when they stumble across Bruticus.
Okay, so clearly you've got this covered. I'm gonna go out for a chocolate melted.
Starscream and Destro agree that now's a good time to unleash their supersized metal puppet on the invading force, and then the defenseless Cobra Commander and Megatron. Baroness makes herself known, and Screamer accuses her of spying on them.
She's our spy, Starscream. My beloved, and your executioner.
She opens fire on the Seeker, which you think would be laughable even against this Decepticon, but it's actually quite effective, seeming to kill him as he plunges into the water. Turns out Destro somehow deduced a spot on Transformers that's vulnerable to pistol fire, and maybe it's the same enhanced projectile she previously threatened Megatron with. Anyway, Baroness is off to get the Matrix, and will contact her tin-plated paramour later. Destro, meanwhile, exposits to Starscream about needing his knowledge of Decepticon strengths and weaknesses, and his physical might to build Bruticus at all.
But I have a new toy now. Decepticon technology fused with my own destructive genius. And I won't be playing with you now. I've outgrown you. Your paltry 7 points of articulation and decal stickers are nothing to the posability of modern Transformers action figures.
He orders his weapon to wipe out everyone in the nearby village, human and robot alike, as Scarlet and Snake look on. And maybe it's the giant being unleashed that causes some rocks to fall on Cobra Commander. Or maybe it just rains boulders in this reality, who knows. He's crushed and can't feel his legs, so Megatron, who was rather enjoying the show, decides to pay final tribute to the might and majesty of Cobra, but transforming into a gun with a clank when we cut to Bruticus bursting out of the ground, declaring how much he hates all things flesh and metal, which you'd think would make him pretty self-loathing, and he hopes to be put back to sleep if he crushes everyone. Wheeljack surmises that despite having Cybertronian components, it might not actually be alive. Whether or not that makes it more or less difficult to defeat is another story. Oh hey Prime, I found Wheeljack! But hey, maybe his optic sensors are as confused by the art as I am. We're not so different after all. Roadblock encourages Grimlock, the heaviest hitter, to take on the behemoth, so he goes into tank mode, and is punched into the air.
I've seen enough!
Really, the rampaging, the hate-fueled threats to everything in its path wasn't a big enough tip-off before he sent one of your non-flyers flying? Prime orders the Autobots to evacuate their human allies from the area as quickly as possible, as he goes in search of the one thing that can stop this new foe, the Matrix. Well, if he's a fan of Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, the first movie might placate him for a couple hours, but any of the ones after that just might make him angrier. Megatron looks like he's just kind of resting upside down, his barrel to CC's head, when Baroness strolls by, says her blue-cloaked boss never really knew what to do with the power he craved, then fires on him with a Decepticon. Out loud she mentions that her darling Destro is the last person she needs to betray, when Scarlet appears on her 6 with a gun trained on her, and she drops her weapon. Snake Eyes grabs the Matrix to deliver to Prime, but Megs transforms between them and demands the MacGuffin. Prime knocks his foe aside, telling the ninja to smash the Matrix on the slim chance it'll destroy Bruticus. Or, better idea, the Autobots dogpile on Megs while Snake hands it off to you to use properly. Snake does as ordered, and we go to Destro suddenly next to Baroness, lamenting the loss of his dreams. So I guess it worked. Scarlet suggests he'll be tried for crimes against humanity if he's lucky and her friends are still alive.
What? Oh, yes. All that stuff I did.
If not, then she'll let his girlfriend at him, because even if Baroness does love him, she would have killed him at some point. Prime, and presumably all the other Transformers, are motionless now, seeming to be offline after the destruction of the Matrix, and they likely knew it was a sacrifice play. The comic ends with some solemn, bittersweet words from Duke and Scarlet as she holds Snake Eyes close. There's a fine line between being a hero and being a memory. And sometimes there's no line at all. That was Transformers G.I. Joe, and it, like war, was hell to read. I can understand if they wanted to develop an atmosphere that better exemplifies the dirty, ugly part of war. As I said, the art style does that pretty well. But all those heavy shadows and lack of detail can leave things confused as the story progresses. Few establishing shots, no indication of where characters are in relation to one another, and cloudy, amorphous backgrounds on every page. Whether we're indoors or outdoors, making every location feel like the same place. Don't get me wrong, for moments like when Scarlet and Snake Eyes discover Bruticus, that spooky, ominous gaze is great for setting up how terrifying he can be. But for most of the story, the chosen aesthetics overall deprive us of much more interesting visuals, as well as telling some characters apart from others. I mean, part of the fun of the Transformers in different time periods or locations or universes is how their alt modes will change, and we didn't get a lot of that, despite some bots just appearing. We saw Megs, Bumblebee, Grimlock, Hound, and a few others, but there were several, like Prime, that I don't think transformed at all. And if the art made the visuals too ambiguous, the pacing certainly didn't help. Many times it felt like different isolated incidents where very little seemed to happen, and while we get some action, and not necessarily bad action, mind you, there's stuff that we're told as if it happened off panel. Like how the Combaticons were destroyed by the Autobots. We never saw them destroyed. But those robots typically combined to form Bruticus, So is the name a coincidence, or did Starscream kill his comrades, or at the very least appropriate their corpses to use in a Frankenstein-bots monster with Destro, and Cobra Commander just assumed it was their enemies that did it? On a similar note, is Flint dead? We don't see a body, everything is over after the Matrix is smashed, and we don't get any kind of epilogue, so what happened with him? Maybe they took a cue from the original animated movie and Flint is in a coma.
That's just lazy writing.
Not to mention, did Zartan end up getting impaled by Lady J's makeshift spear? I wouldn't be surprised. For a master of disguise, he really sucked at his job. Got found out pretty quickly both times he tried passing for a Joe. A lot of good he was. Or bad in this case.
I'll give you a kiss, all right.
A kiss of death! Hachi Machi! She's awful.
There was some potential in his viewing people as nothing mentality, coupled with his identity issues. There was some intrigue, but the story doesn't do anything with it. Prime's ethical dilemma about helping in a human war was weak and ill-defined. The friendships between some Joes and Autobots could have used more development, and we really could have used less Snake Eyes versus Storm Shadow. It would have been shorter, but at least it wouldn't have made a ninja fight boring. But it wasn't entirely bad. Cobra Commander was pretty imposing here, threatening and dangerous, but egotistical and blind to his mistakes, and that made him a pretty good villain. Destro teaming with, then betraying Starscream was a nice addition to the story, at least helping to do part of what they set out to do by taking out the Commander. And while I have problems with the resolution, especially how there was no certainty Bruticus would go offline after the Matrix was shattered, good thing it worked because then Destro would have taken over the world, it's possible that all the Cybertronians dying, literally, or at least going into stasis, could be a statement on the Pyrrhic nature of war, essentially what the characters said at the end. And heck, maybe the backgrounds being cloudy all the time are supposed to be a statement on the fog of war or something. And yes, there were some good moments between characters, whether it was Ironhide's mic drop with those bullets, or Roadblock encouraging Grimlock to climb that hill. It's an interesting concept with a lot of good ideas, but the art kind of gets in the story's way, and maybe its own too, as well as pacing tending to trip up. It has its positives and a couple really cool moments, but maybe a little too gritty for its own good. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.